Hello creeps! Andy here, and today I wanted to rank for you every monster, creature, feature type of book that I've read. Sometimes I get comments or DMs asking me to recommend monster type books, and somebody actually left a comment and that's what sparked this whole video. So thank you for your comment. And so yeah, hopefully this helps some people who are looking for kind of like creature, monster type books. That's what they're called. Just really quick though, I'm not doing all of other books that I could rank in separate categories. So all of the vampire books that I've read are not in here. I've only included one because I felt like it was different from a typical vampire book, and same with alien books. Those can be separate videos on their own, but these are kind of a mixture of everything, so it was a little hard to rank. So what I ended up doing was separating them into like categories. That way it was easier to compare to each other than like a book about aliens and a book about sea creatures, you know? Also know that I don't know if you'll agree with me that all of these are monsters, so keep that in mind. And I'm sure that I've missed one here or there, but this is the list of what I've come up with. So I've separated them into categories, and then I'll talk about them from my least favorite to my most favorite. So let's get started. So here is our first category. This category is called The Madness from the Sea. They're just quotes from one of the books that are included in these categories. Basically, these are all just our sea monsters. Obviously, the term monster is subjective, so it's hard. Like, is a shark a monster? I don't know. So you might not agree with all of these, like I said, but this is just what I came up with. The very first book in our category, so starting from my least favorite, is actually Jaws by Peter Benchley. Now, it's not that this book isn't super interesting. It's not that Peter Benchley is a great writer, isn't a great writer, is what I meant to say. It's just that I grew up watching the movie Jaws, and it is so different from the book. I really enjoy the camaraderie in the movie, and that is not, it's all just a manly competition in the book. I don't particularly love the characters in the book, but there are some things about the book that I do really enjoy. I don't think I need to give too much of an intro, you know, it's about a shark. However, Jaws is a mindless killing machine in the movie. In the book, it's much more accurate as far as the description of sharks and sea life goes. And Peter Benchley has, I believe, been sailing his whole life, so he knows a lot about sharks and about the ocean, and so it was really interesting learning about the anatomy of the shark and going into a little bit more scientific detail. I did really enjoy that. However, I think that if you grew up watching the movie and then you read the book, you probably won't enjoy the book as much. Not to say that it wasn't enjoyable, and not to say that I'm not glad that I've read it. I hate double negatives. I'm glad that I read it, is what I'm trying to say. And I'll probably read it again, but not my favorite just because of the movie, I think. Let me know what you guys feel, how you guys feel about this one, especially if you read the book before watching the movie. I'm interested to know. The next two I feel like are pretty comparable, so I don't know how to rank these, but this one is Peter Benchley's Beast. This is, again, like another sea creature, but I don't have a movie to compare it to, so I really did enjoy this book. It's just about this, yeah, beast of the sea. I don't want to give too much away, but when boats and people start disappearing, there are scientists and other people in the town that want to discover what it is. So that is Beast, and I did enjoy this one more than Jaws. I do really like this book, and I love sea creatures books in general. My shirt is pretty hairy, isn't it? We're just gonna ignore that. That's why I don't wear black a lot in my house, because I have a zoo in here. The next one, like I said, I think it's pretty on par with Beast, is Meg by Steve Alten. This is the book that the Meg is based on. I've done a movie verse book on this, on Jaws, so I'll leave those in the description in case you want a more in-depth analysis of this and how it relates to the movie. But I really freaking enjoyed this one. I thought it was a blast. It's just about this, I've read this one a while ago, I think last year. So it's about this scientist. They are journeying into a deep canyon. What ends up happening is there's this blast of hot water, and it allows the megalodon to surface. And so that's how the megalodon comes into contact with people and stuff. And so they just go on this journey trying to stop it. I really did like this one. I'm not gonna lie though, I do like the main movie as well. I just love weird ocean shark type films. So I did enjoy the movie, but I do think that this is more, like I said, on the scientific side, or at least it tries to be. I don't know how accurate it is, but yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I'm definitely excited to pick up the second Meg book. So highly recommend those if you guys haven't picked them up. And the last one that I want to talk about is The Call of Cthulhu. This is, of course, by H.P. Lovecraft, and I love this book. There's just so much wonderful stuff in here. I believe it's more of like a novella. It's not a full-length novel by any means, but there's just so much in here. Adventure and cults and a magic door that opens to a deadly sea creature. It's just an absolute blast. Cthulhu is one that actually really surprised me. And so if I could just read you the first quote, 355, come on. Get your life together. This is, of course, where the quote for this category came from. It's a chapter in here. The very first line of this story just says, "The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid inland of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far." His writing is just fantastic. I think that if you love science fiction, I think you'll love this. It's an awesome book. It really does kind of twist reality. Super impressive. I mean, this book was written in I think it was written in 1926 and published in 1928, if I'm not mistaken. So kind of crazy that a book written that long ago still has the ability to kind of creep you out and bring such joy. I really do love The Call of Cthulhu. So anyways, let's jump over to our next category. By the way, the categories aren't ranked from, like, I don't like these books necessarily more than I like the water books, you know? It's just a way for me to be able to rank the books with like books. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay. The next category here, we have our traditional monster books, and this category is called "The Wind Doesn't Scratch Doors and Wine to Be Let In." And that's just a quote from one of these two. So these, like I said, are more traditional monsters when you think of monsters, vampires, werewolves, that kind of thing. Let's begin with Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. Now, it is a surprise to me that Ray Bradbury isn't the top of the list because he is one of my favorite writers ever, but this isn't one of my favorite books from him. It's fun and it's cute and it's, you know, kind of weird. When an odd circus comes to town, two boys go and delve a little bit deeper to figure out what really is going on. So it's more of, I would say, like a extremely light kind of introduction to horror, I would say. It's written really beautifully. To be honest, I'm gonna have to reread this one again because, yeah, it's been a long time since I've read it. The reason it's in this category, this one and The October Country are kind of hard because they're kind of in the middle of this category and that category, where they are traditional in some senses, like I would say witchy type stuff, but then there's also other characters that are more unique as well. So it's kind of hard to place this one, but still not my favorite Bradbury, and that's why it is last on the list, but I still think worth a read, especially during October. The next one is Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf. Now, I love this book, but I just enjoyed some other ones more. So this one is just your typical werewolf story. It takes place in a town over the course of a year. It's written very neat. It goes through the calendar year, so you get a little bit of each season in there. The characters all link back around. It's a really fun story, and I'm not where I thought before I started doing this video. I thought I wasn't a big traditional monster type of reader, but this is one of my favorite Stephen King books. I think it's a blast, especially if you guys buy this copy. I mean, I don't know if it comes in any other copy, but with the pictures and the way that the book is set up through the months, it's just really awesome and a fun ride. Highly recommend that guy. It's just about a werewolf coming to the town and what ends up happening to the town throughout the year. The next one we have here is Craig DeLuey's Stuff for the Children. Again, another one that I absolutely love. It's about this disease that murders all the kids, and the kids come back from the grave with a thirst for blood. And it's more really about how far a parent would go for their child, what they would do for them. It's a pretty fun twist on a typical vampire story. In fact, I don't know that I would just call it a vampire story, which is why I did include it in this. But when I do rank all my vampire books, this will definitely be in there somewhere. Highly recommend this one. But I did love a little bit more Ray Bradbury's The October Country. This one, again, is kind of hard to place because it's a bunch of short stories and they all revolve around Halloween, and there are some traditional things in here like vampires, but there are some more unique killers in here as well. So it's kind of hard to place this one, but I absolutely love this. I think this might be my favorite Bradbury. It's so hard to tell, but I would say everyone calls him a science fiction writer, but if you want something more horror based, it's this book. And Something Wicked This Way comes too. I freaking love this book. It's so fun. It gets you in the mood for October, for fall, for Halloween. Such a great read of cute little short stories. Next one on my list, my friends. And the next two, it's hard to again compare them because they're such different books, but this is Who Goes There. This is by John W. Campbell, and this is the novella that the movie The Thing is based off of. I said in my previous video, I don't know when I talked about this, but I will do a whole movie versus book, but I'm gonna wait till it gets colder. I'll do it mid-December or something like that. But I absolutely love this. I mean, I love The Thing and I love to see where it came from. The book is creepy and fun and weird, and it is much different from the movie. I think a lot of people would be surprised to read this and see where it goes. It definitely ends in more of a science fiction realm than the movie does, even though I know it's, you know, an alien movie, but I also think it's a lot more than that. I absolutely love this. This again was one that was written a long time ago. It was written in wait a second. Let me Google this really quick. Wow, this was written in 1938. That is wild. Isn't it so interesting how these books just transcend time and they're still just as creepy, if not creepier, than modern day works? Oh, I love this book so much. So yeah, highly recommend that guy. And the next one here is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. We all know what Frankenstein's about, but I gotta tell ya, this book is just so beautiful. It was written during the Romantic period, so you get a lot of that beautiful description of the land. Frankenstein's monster learns about life, about humanity through literature, which is such a beautiful sentiment in itself. And he's very poetic and well-spoken, and just not at all how the movies portray. 100,000,000% worth a read. I think it's so cool to read a book that has absolutely transcended time and been transformed into dozens, if not hundreds, of different movies, films, stories. I mean, there's so much that is inspired from this book, and there is a reason for that. I can promise you that. So absolutely love this one. Again, one that I want to revisit and analyze a little bit deeper for you guys. So hopefully I can get around to that soon. It's a great book, so that's why it is the top of the list. Now let's move on to our last category, and these are more unique monsters. I didn't know how else to separate these categories, so whereas the other ones were vampires, werewolves, things like that, these are things a little outside of the box. Not saying that they've never been done before or that they aren't inspired from some of those, but I do think that they are separate from those traditional monsters, and so that's why I created this third category and the final category, and this is called Trying to Digest Your Friends. So let's start with the last on my list, and that is Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. Now, a lot of people absolutely love this book, so keep that in mind. And the premise is so cool. It's about a married couple that go to a cabin. There's people or something outside the cabin that's talking and asking for help, and you can see it. It looks like a person, but it doesn't feel like a person. And when the wife ends up falling asleep, she ends up communicating with this thing outside, and it ends up following them home. So a really creepy premise. The only thing I would say about this one is that starts off really strong. First half of the book, absolutely loved, but I do think that it is a little repetitive and there's not much of a wrap up at the end. So it wasn't my favorite book ever. Still glad that I read it. Still a creepy premise, and I know a lot of people absolutely love this book. Let me know if you guys have read this one, but this is last on my list of the non-traditional monsters. Next up is The Mist by Stephen King. Now, I really do enjoy this short story. It's about this small town that gets encapsulated in fog, and these monsters come out and destroy the town and kill a bunch of people. But the thing that I love about this book is it's not just human versus nature, it's also human versus human too. You really get to see what happens in emergency situations where people kind of start to lose their mind. I do really love this book, and the only reason why it's this low on the list is because some of these other books are just fantastic. So I still really do love this one, still recommend it. However, I would say that I do prefer the ending to the movie more. I do think that it's more brutal, and one of those moments in cinema where you just go, oh shit. The next one here is Voices in the Snow by Darcy Coates. And the reason why this one is here on the list is for quite a few reasons. So it's about this, I forget what they call them, but they're dead zones, something like that. These dead zones start popping up across the world, and anybody who enters or lives in the dead zone is not heard from again. But people don't know what's going on. So it's about this girl who's trying to reach her sister, I believe, and ends up crashing in a dead zone, doesn't realize it, and she ends up being saved by a local there, and it's kind of their survival story, I suppose, or attempting to survive and figure out what happens in these dead zones and why they've popped up and all that sort of thing. Well, there's a few reasons why I love this one. One, this is the first Darcy Coates book I ever read, and it just got me hooked on Darcy Coates. I don't know if you guys can see up there, but I have probably like 14 books from her that I've read just in the past year or two, because this book started my obsession. So this one will always have a special place in my heart. Another reason I love this so much is because there's a lot in here that I didn't think that I would enjoy. For example, there's some romance aspects in here, and I've always been like, romance, bleh. But I do enjoy it. I figured out through reading this book. It's just like a cute romance story wrapped in blood and guts. Another thing that I didn't think I would like about it is the monsters. It's something so outside of what I would think that I would enjoy, and she just made it so easily digestible and something that I really fell into and was interested in. I picked this up randomly at the bookstore. I read the first 20 pages and went, oh, I know where this is going. And then I kept reading and I was like, oh, no, I don't know where this is going. Thank you, Darcy. She tends to do that with all of her books, where they seem like a typical horror story that you've read before, and then she has a way of just making it her own. Anyways, I love this book for a variety of reasons, but I will say that the monsters may not be everybody's cup of tea, but if you want something a little easier to read, a little romance in there, then this is for you. I talked a lot about that one. Next up is Dark Harvest by Norman Patridge. I've talked about this so much in the past month. It's about this pumpkin-headed scarecrow that comes around every Halloween that the kids in town have to murder. But the uniqueness of it, the folklore-y feel of the story, it's just so cute. And so that is why it is here on my list. The Ruins by Scott Smith. I think you could argue that this wasn't a monster book, but I do think it belongs in here. It's about these group of tourists that get, well, they're told not to go on this, Mayan temple, and the locals in town, the indigenous people, are like, hey, don't get away from there, but they're dumb and they ignore them and they just do what they want to do, and they end up being forced to stay. The ruins take on a mind of their own, and the story is more than just that. Yeah, it doesn't give anything away in the back, so I don't want to give too much away, but this book is so fantastic. It's one of my favorite books ever written. I think the reason I love this book so much is because you feel like you're there with the characters, and I just put myself in their shoes thinking, what would I do? Is there anything you could do? It was also made into a movie, which I do prefer the book more, but it's cool that the movie is so different from the book, so you can enjoy them in very different ways. The characters are kind of swapped around, the ending's very different, and the kills happen differently, so you could definitely enjoy both. And so I thought that was a pretty unique kind of adaptation of a story. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Scott Smith wrote the movie too. A very unique monster that I wouldn't think would creep me out. It's more of a fight for survival and how far you would go to try to survive, and I absolutely love that. Okay, next up, my friends, Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. Holy crap, is this book one of the best horror books I've ever read. I absolutely love this. It's about a group of these kids, they're best friends, 5 of them, and I have read this one a while ago too, so I just want to make sure I get the information correct. What ends up happening is there's something in the town that nobody is quite noticing except them, so they dive further to try to stop it from taking over. And that's kind of all I will say, but there's so much in this book that I absolutely loved. The camaraderie of the kids, the nostalgic feel of just being a kid. Like, you guys know, if you were born in the 90s or before, or had your childhood in the 90s or before, we didn't have what these kids have nowadays, you know, their iPads and their video games and whatever. Like, we were out riding our bikes, and it just brought back so much nostalgia for me, even though this book takes place long before I was a kid, in the 60s actually. But it still did bring back a lot of my own feel of childhood, and it also kind of made me feel sad that I feel like kids nowadays probably won't get to feel how these kids feel. Yeah, it's kind of sad, but they have fights where they throw dirt clods at each other. You know, like things that you do when you're young and you're a kid and you're just trying to entertain yourself. I loved this book so much. I highly recommend. The monsters are super unique. The story I think is really fun, and one of the best horror books I've ever read. And the last on this list, my friends, is The Terror, again by Dan Simmons. I love him so much. This book is one of the best horror books. The monster is quite unique in here, but that's not even really the creepy part. I mean, I've talked about this book so many times, but it's about the 1845 Franklin expeditions, the men going up to the Arctic and trying to find a Northwest Passage. It's a true story of what happened, and he uses true people, like people that actually existed, but obviously changes it. There's a lot of mystery surrounding the voyage. Nobody actually knows what happens, although some things become clear and there's documentaries and stuff about it. But what he does is he takes this historical fiction and adds in the supplemental supernatural horror element on top of that. And it's not even necessarily that's creepy about the story. I mean, just hearing about the Franklin expedition really just got to me. It's dark, it's creepy. The quote that I read, the something about eating your friends, that is from this book. It breaks your heart. It makes you feel so deeply for these men that had to go through this, but this is so worth the read. I absolutely love this book. It's one of my favorite horror books ever written. So those are the monster books that I have read, ranked from my least favorite to most favorite. Even if something was in last place doesn't mean that it was a bad book by any means. I think you guys know that by now. It's just that I enjoyed other books more than that. Please leave a comment down below and let me know your favorite monster, creature feature type books. I hope this video helped in some way. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with, of course, another horror video. Bye, guys.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.